prise de débat.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a former member of the military, it's a great pleasure for me to rise to speak on this motion. I joyfully remember the evenings I spent at the Canadian Legion on various occasions. It was always very pleasant. So I'm very honored to speak to this particular motion. Since 2007, the government strategic examination seeks to cut back various federal programs and services in all departments, but notably in the Department of Veterans Affairs. The goal of this is to identify possible cuts up to 10% in each department. When we're talking about Veterans Affairs Canada, 90% of its budget is spent directly on programs and benefits for veterans, and 70% of the staff directly delivers services to veterans. So I think there's not a lot of room for cutbacks there. Given that context, the calculation is quite simple. If Veterans Affairs Canada's budget is to be cut, services and benefits have to be cut somehow. And those go directly to veterans. The budget cuts and staff cuts will have no other result than reduce the services given to veterans in this country. They already have trouble getting access to some of these services, and many services have seen lesser quality over the years. There are problems, for instance, in follow-up on files. It's more and more difficult to contact an officer directly by phone because there are fewer and fewer call centers with less staff. If this keeps up, veterans will have more ease talking about their internet service provider hotline in India rather than a federal officer at Veterans Affairs in our own country. The time allocated to make decisions on veterans' needs has been reduced, but the wait time that veterans have before they receive services for physical or psychological health has not been reduced. We see cutbacks that force officers to work faster, work overtime, make decisions more quickly, and perhaps not have taken the time to do their work properly.
Numerous organizations right now have spoken out against the cuts to Veterans Affairs. For example, the Royal Canadian Legion, the Veterans Ombudsman, all of these organizations have highlighted the problems that these cuts will cost and the problems that veterans are already having because of staff cuts. Veterans who come back from Afghanistan or current soldiers need these services. They deserve them. I am a nurse by training, and when I talk about soldiers who come back from military ops, I know the consequences that they can have on people. For example, physical health problems, mental health problems, post-traumatic stress disorder. All of these are very serious consequences that need immediate care, but also follow-up. When I refer to soldiers who have been to Afghanistan, between 20 and 30% of them have mental health problems or suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, including physical wounds. Those are not problems that can be left for 2 years without doing something. I'm referring to serious health problems that call for immediate care and assistance. Since 2001, 40,000 members of the Canadian Forces have been deployed to Afghanistan, and some are still serving, but some of them have become modern-day veterans. If we count an average of 25%, that is 10,000 veterans, that many people have serious health problems because they served our country. These are figures that are submitted by DND. And so they show the crucial importance of taking the services owed to veterans seriously. Now, I've been talking about veterans, but what about the families as well? Most of our soldiers who come back to Canada after their missions, and unfortunately, Some of them have never come back and will not come back. But in either case, families need services. They need support services, because caring for someone who has post-traumatic stress disorder, it takes a great deal of devotion. It's very difficult. So these families need help as well. The children of these people need help so that they can support their mother or their father who are suffering from that problem. So when we talk about veterans, we're talking not only about soldiers, about service members, about former RCMP members, but we're talking about the families as well. And we must never forget that, Mr. Speaker. We are calling for the Department of Veterans Affairs to be exempt from cuts in the 2012-2013 budget. Their budget is essential if we are to maintain a certain level of service and program quality, as well as the benefits to which the veterans are entitled. We must not forget that this program already has a number of problems. It's not a problem where everything runs smoothly, so there are already problems, and thanks to these cuts, they would create even more problems. So I think that we are being very reasonable in our request that services, or that the budget of Veterans Affairs not be cut. Now, every day in this House, between 2 and 3 in the afternoon, either the Associate Minister of Defence or the Minister of National Defence stands up and tells everyone that I do not support our troops when I call for accountability, when I call for answers that Canadians are entitled to with regard to the F-35 program. However, I think that when we're talking about our men and women in uniform who have come back from serving in missions, who have devoted a number of years of their lives to our country, who have risked their lives, and who have been fortunate enough to be able to come back, who need psychological, financial, and professional support, we are told that there will be cuts to the budget. So the government seems to be able to afford jets that aren't yet airborne, and whose price is constantly climbing, and whose delivery date we don't know. But it seems to not be able to afford to support our veterans who come back from serving our country. And I don't think that makes any sense, Mr. Speaker. Makes you wonder who is really supporting our troops in this House. When this government formed the official opposition, it said that it would extend program services for veterans to all widows of veterans of the Second World War and the Korean War, but it didn't do so. This government called in 2005 for a public inquiry into Agent Orange and complete compensation for veterans who were exposed thereto, but it didn't do so. The government pledged in 2007 to take measures concerning the unfairness of the CSIP program for members of CF personnel who were released for health reasons, but it didn't do so. In 2005, this government pledged to take measures to reform the Veterans Review and Appeal Board, to replace it by a tribunal composed of medical services personnel who were qualified, but it did not do so. So I don't think this government really is supporting our troops. So we want them to support us when we call on no cuts to be made to the Veterans Affairs Department. The NDP has long asked for this government not to cut services to veterans, and it proposed a number of measures to improve services to veterans. Health excellence centers, greater access to hospitals, a reform of the new Veterans Charter, an increase in expenses allowed for funerals, concrete action against homelessness of veterans. And so when I see what we have proposed, that is supporting our veterans. We still wanted the government to put an end to the clawback of disability benefits for veterans from the RCMP and the CF. We want them to extend the Veterans Independence Program to former RCMP officers. We want pensions and disabilities for people who get married after the age of 60, improved care for people with PTSD, reduction of wait times for disability benefits, fair treatment for the calculation of annual leave for Canadian Forces members who want to enter the public service, and the elimination or the reform of the Veterans Review and Appeal Board. So for many of those measures, that is what I call supporting our troops, but the government's not delivering. So to support our troops, it is essential that the budget of Veterans Affairs Canada not be cut. That is the only reasonable attitude that this government should take to support our veterans. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have two questions, very simple questions, Mr. Speaker, for my honourable colleague from Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Does she not agree that it is possible to protect our veterans' benefits while achieving savings if we have a bureaucracy that works more effectively? I was part of the public service. She was part of the public service. It is always possible to find a more effective way to deliver on the goods, and this is no exception. Secondly, how does she justify her position in favor of guarding, keeping a large bureaucracy within Veterans Affairs while being a member of a party that votes time and time again against our program seeking to renew Canadian Forces equipment, whether it be for new armed vehicles or new jets? How does she reconcile those two positions? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I said this, as I said at the beginning of my speech, 86% of the Veterans Affairs Canada goes directly to benefits and services for veterans. So I do not believe that it is a department that has a very large bureaucracy. Almost all the money goes to programs and services. And right now, despite that, there are problems with the services. So I don't think that at Veterans Affairs Canada, the problem is with the bureaucracy. I think that there is a lack of funding that makes the services difficult to access. Right now, the public servants are doing overtime. So I don't think that the problem is with the bureaucracy. That is why that I think that we should not, the budget of Veterans Affairs Canada should not be cut.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Charlottetown.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister repeats time and time again that veteran services will not be affected. But what he does not say is that he will maintain the level of the budget. Is it possible to provide services at an acceptable level if cuts are made as are projected in the next budget? The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would urge this House to do some very simple math. 90% of the Veterans Affairs Canada budget goes directly to services and benefits. They are seeking to reduce the budget by 10%. So concretely, what they want to do is eliminate all the public servants because we shouldn't be cutting services and benefits. So what they're saying is that if you want to eliminate 10%, then there's no staff at Veterans Affairs. There are no offices, no telephones. Do the math. You'll find out it doesn't work. Questions and comments, the Honourable Member for Longueuil-Pierre-Boucher. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I would like to congratulate my colleague for her very passionate and informed debate. We can sense all the respect she has for the Canadian Forces. So I would just like her to talk about the sense of despair that many veterans feel because they are not being listened to with regard to their needs. The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. I think that when we talk about this sense of despair, we're talking about a lack of logic. Military members are used to reacting quickly. We ask them to respond very, very swiftly in extreme situations. But what happens when they have extreme situations in their lives, when they have health problems, when they have crises, that we're asking them to wait for weeks and weeks before receiving health care. I think that is what is behind their sense of despair. Whereas all their lives they have been used to rapid reaction, rapid responses to certain situations. On the contrary, when they are confronted with the system, they have to deal with eternal decisions that take forever. There is no logic. Things don't make any sense compared to what they are used to. And because they receive these kind of orders, and this doesn't comply with what they have known.